Welcome to The Profitable Web Designer, a podcast for web designers who want to work less and make more money. I'm your host, Shannon Mattern, founder of the Web Designer Academy, where we've helped hundreds of web designers stop undercharging, overworking, and create profitable, sustainable web design businesses. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Profitable Web Designer podcast. Today, I'm joined by Rich Brooks, founder and president of Flyte New Media, which is a digital agency in Portland, Maine that's been in business for over 28 years. Rich is a nationally recognized speaker on entrepreneurship and digital marketing and social media. You may have seen him on Inc.com or at Social Media Marketing World. And he's an author. He's the founder of the Agents of Change, which is an annual conference and weekly podcast that focuses on search, social, and mobile marketing. So, Rich, thank you so much for being here on the Profitable Web Designer podcast.
Shannon, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you have been on my list of people that I've wanted to talk to for quite a while. And when our mutual friend, Paul Klein, who taught me everything I know about pricing strategy for service providers, when we were chit-chatting and he was like, have I introduced you to Rich yet? And he offered to connect us. I was like, yes, please do. So just to kick things off, can you take us back in your time machine to the beginning, 28 years ago? What inspired you to start your agency back then?
Well, yeah. So the year was 1997. It was not an agency. It was me working out of my bedroom with an old Mac Performa that could barely perform. And it was just, those were the days. And I was working in medical sales and enjoyed it. In fact, to be honest, I would say that the most important job I ever had was in sales. That gave me the confidence to then go on and do other things. But basically, I was starting to read articles in the Boston Globe. I lived down in Boston at the time, and these reporters talking about the internet. And I'd always felt computer savvy, and suddenly I had no idea what they were talking about, which really pissed me off. So I basically got a computer and started teaching myself how to build web pages. First, just to get on the internet was a challenge back then, but then figuring out how to start building things. And at one point, I just decided, this is something I really enjoy doing. And I was starting to get tired of my other job. And I basically said, I'll give it 2 years. After 2 years, either programmers are going to learn how to design or designers will learn how to program. I'll be out of a job, but it'll be a fun 2 years. This shows how little I knew about business at the time, because I didn't realize you could just hire people who were more talented than you, which is ultimately how I ended up growing my business. But back then, it was me and my old Mac Performa, and basically just cranking out websites for, if I was lucky, $500. And I did everything, and it was fun. But over time, I started to add a lot more services to what now is called Flyte New Media has to offer.
I love that story. And I know so many of our listeners can relate to the just that curiosity and the passion and the drive to want to just try something different. Even now in 2025, which sounds crazy to say, that we're already in 2025, there are people that are like, yeah, I'm starting this business in my office, in my bedroom, at my kitchen table, and still starting the same way. So you had your sales background. I imagine that skill led you to getting your first clients, but how did you get your first clients back in the day?
That's interesting. So basically, I was working for this company at the time called Ultra Care Services. We were a medical supply company. And more or less when my boss wasn't looking, one day because I can't just play around on the web. I need to have a goal. So when I'm learning anything, so I basically said, I'll build a website for the company. I came in, I showed it to my boss. He immediately took me off the road visiting nursing homes and selling to them and made me his in-house marketer, which was not a good fit for me, actually. I just didn't do well in the office environment that was there at the time. So that's part of the reason why I ended up quitting and going out on my own. But yeah, that was my first website, and I showed it to him. And then I talked to a couple of other clients of ours and talked to them. I ended up getting a lot of business through my dad, which is probably not a story that's new to anybody. You talk to friends and relatives first. My dad at the time still is a clinical psychologist in Boston. He was well known. He spoke a lot. And I said, let me build a website for you. He had no idea what I was doing, but he's like, sure. I think it was mostly he didn't want me to fail and move back in the house. But whatever the case is, I think he let me redo his website like 4 times in that first year just to keep me in the ability to live on my own. And he would speak to a bunch of other groups. And at the time, psychologists did not have websites. Like that was just not a thing that was happening. Most businesses didn't have them. So people would say, well, how'd you get a website? And he had a stack of my cards with him. And he'd be like, oh, you should talk to my son. And that's literally like probably 80% of my first few years in business were doing websites for either psychologists or for the groups he was speaking to, which were a lot of ADHD and learning disabilities groups. They were looking for websites. And so that's kind of how I started to cut my teeth in all that. And then over time, you start to build up a reputation.
Yeah. So here's the thing about you that I find really interesting in that you run a digital marketing agency, you help people with digital marketing strategies. And yet, the juxtaposition of that is I see you speaking, building relationships, positioning yourself as like an industry leader, meeting a lot of people in a very analog kind of way, right? And so that's one of the challenges that or that's kind of one of my passions, I guess I would say, is like teaching web designers and people who are in like those first 3 to 5 years of business, like how to build a business in a way that like maybe seems in conflict with what they're doing for their clients, right? Like they're
Yeah.
building these digital marketing machines for their clients, and yet they don't need to necessarily market themselves the same way. So I'm curious, like what your philosophy or thought is about that.
That's an excellent, excellent observation, Shannon. And I would say that it reminds me of something that happened a few years ago. One of the ways that I continue to grow I don't do web design anymore. I have a team that does the work for me. But one of the ways that I've kind of grown as a leader, as a business owner, is by starting an agency mastermind with 3 other agency owners who we don't compete with each other, but we have a lot of mutual respect. And so we talk about it. And one time I came to them and I said, listen, here's my issue. It's like we're running Google ads. We run them successfully for our clients. We're not getting even a nibble on these. And 2 of the people in the group said, oh, yeah, I stopped doing those years ago. They just don't work for us. And it was really an interesting reminder that everybody's business is different. And sometimes the way, the channels, the messaging, we just need to be very observant of what's working and what's not working, because sometimes best practices are not actually going to result in best results. So for me, one of the things that I discovered early on, yes, early on, blogging, being on Twitter, those were huge generators of business. That just doesn't really work for us anymore. Yes, we still do get some business from people who find us when they do a Google search on Google ads or Facebook ads or web design, whatever it is. But most of it, and of course, this is 27, 28 years later, has been built on our reputation. And one of the things that I enjoy doing is going out and doing public presentations. I do them virtually and I do them in person. I enjoy both. I actually enjoy in-person events more. And that's been great because, as you know, there's a lot of competition online. There's competition in the news feeds. There's competition on social media. There's competition in Google, in SEO, in the inbox. But if you're up on stage, and yes, there may be concurrent sessions with you, but you have that audience. You are physically higher than them. They have to look up to you. There's no other, hopefully, distractions in the room, and you can establish yourself as the expert in that room. The best events for me generally are when it's not about digital marketing. It's usually an association meeting of some industry. And I'm like one of the only, if not the only person talking about digital marketing. And that has been very beneficial to us. That kind of builds trust. And then they're interested in working with us. So that's been probably one of the biggest ways that I've gotten business for the company. And I'm sure a lot of your audience would find similar things. And you don't have to start. One of my biggest audiences ever was over 800 people at Social Media Marketing World, but I started with 12 people at the Chamber of Commerce and I sold tickets. I think they were all $25, but I sold tickets to a presentation on SEO, and that's how you get started. So I think that that's one of the ways that you can approach it for sure.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've spoken to a room of like 6 women about building your web design business. And one of the reasons that I love podcasting and podcast guesting or speaking at virtual events or in-person events is same thing for me. I'm like, I've tried ads and different things, and the format of what we do just hasn't seemed to, like, I guess, the time from someone to become a customer, from the time they click on an ad for us, it's just doesn't work with our business model. And so I'm all about going out there and meeting people and building relationships and connecting and adding value in different ways. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to help our listeners understand is, like, you don't have to market your business the same way you help your clients market theirs. And if you just stop trying and go, like, people tell me all the time, my biggest problem is that all my business comes from word of mouth and referrals. And I'm like, that's your biggest opportunity. What are you talking
Right.
about? That's not a
Yeah,
problem.
maybe you just need to start asking more people to recommend you rather than just waiting for those to roll in. But
Yes.
that's a fantastic stream. And even when because of course I track all this stuff and I'm like, okay, here's all the people who have talked to me about business or all the proposals I sent out. How did they hear of us? And usually it's associate of Rich or saw Rich speak, or it's somebody referred me and the original referrer was somebody who saw me speak. So there's always those kind of interactions. And no, you don't want to have just one channel for getting referrals, but word of mouth is probably one of the most, first of all, the most cost effective way of doing it. And also it's built in because if you enjoyed working with them and they enjoyed working with you, if they're going to recommend you to somebody, chances are you're going to like working with them as well. I've had clients who I don't necessarily like and weren't a great fit. They're like, oh, you should give me a discount because I can recommend you. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't want more of you as clients, quite honestly. I don't say that. I just say, yeah, no, you should pay for what you get. But anyway.
Well, that's a great segue to my next question is, like, what are some of those early challenges that you had in, like, really finding the right fit clients and working your way to, like, building the agency that you've built around those right fit clients?
Right. And you don't know that right out of the gate. I mean,
Yeah.
you may have your own personal feelings. I like people who are straightforward, or I like people who are kind. But the bottom line is you start to understand who you're best suited to serve and who's a good fit for you. And, for us, it's people who, after all this time in business, our best clients are the owners or a director of marketing or somebody in that position who has the ear of the owner and can make their own decisions. Like for us, we get the best input. We do our best work when there's an internal person who's passionate about marketing, who understands the benefit of marketing and is willing to work with us to really help them, like more of a partnership. But there are other people where you might feel like, oh, listen, I don't need anything from you. I'm going to design your website. I'm going to write your copy. I'm going to do everything. I need you to stay out of it. So some of it is just experience. You start to see who are these people who you like working with, who are the people who you don't like working with. And then you start looking at the channels you got them from. Like, oh, I was posting on Reddit or X or whatever it may be, and I'm getting really good or really bad leads. Those are the kind of things. Or I really like working with sustainable businesses. So let me go reach out to some organizations around sustainable businesses and see if they need somebody to come and do a presentation for them on marketing or web design or whatever it may be. So that's some of the ways, but it really just comes down to going through the experience. You are going to have some really crappy clients who you literally can't wait to fire. And by the way, I don't mean to be cruel, but one of the greatest feelings in the world is firing a bad client. I've done it actually on a Zoom call when I didn't like the way he was talking to a coworker of mine. I was trying to save the business. I'm trying to explain to him why things are going the way that they are. And then he just snapped at her and I said, you know what? I think we're done here. I'll refund the rest of your money and you don't need to do anything else. And I closed the Zoom call. And I think my coworker was like impressed that I put her in front of the client, paying client, because I'm like, nobody should have to work with somebody like that. And so those are the kind of things that also make a difference.
It is the most empowering feeling ever to stand your ground. And we talk about this all the time in the Web Designer Academy too, because we work with people, we coach the business side of running a web design business, and we work with people who are coming out of corporate. They are coming out of a lifetime of conditioning that their boss is right and they do what the client says and the customer is always right. And they bend themselves over backwards and turn into a pretzel to please everyone. And my number one job is to, like, help them undo that and really step into a position of, like, leadership and authority in a mutually beneficial way, not in a my way or the highway kind of way.
Right. It's not a bullying situation.
Yeah. And it's not you're above me or I'm above you. It's a partnership, but it does take a lot of undoing of some of that, I call it employee mindset, that I totally brought into my web design business in the early days, where I'm like, well, I have 10 clients and they're all my boss and I have to make them all happy and I get to be talked to this way because I guess that's just how it is. And if I fire them, they'll be upset and I won't have any more money. And I just learned all of that stuff the hard way too, until
Right.
I was like, oh, wait, this is my company. I get to run it how I want. And I needed help to figure that out. But yeah.
I think sometimes those lessons happen through happenstance. I remember back when I was doing medical sales and I had one foot out the door already and I had to do this expo. We had all of our products lined up. I was doing it by myself. I was so not interested in being there. And, we were selling to nursing staffs and stuff. And one of the nurses comes by and she looks at my table and she kind of says, I don't think I need any of your stuff. And I'm like, I bet you don't. And I literally turned away from her because I could really give to. And she's like, well, maybe I can. And I watched her talk herself into, I don't remember if we got the business, but talk herself into wanting the products. And then she left. And the guy next to me said, that was some amazing reverse psychology. And part of me was like, what's reverse psychology? Right. But I'm a son of a psychologist. So I kind of knew what it was. But I was like, that's really interesting. It's never about manipulating people. I know that there are many people who are very successful at being manipulators, but it is about understanding human condition and also understanding where your barriers are. And so I think when it comes to I'm also a people pleaser. I want everybody to like me. I'm the Michael Scott of the group. It's like everybody's got to like me. But I also realize that they're not going to like me or respect me in the long run if I just keep on saying yes, 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 yes. So there are times, and sometimes these are difficult, unhappy conversations where I just have to say, we can't do it that way. We can't make that deadline. Or just say, look, you're not giving me what I need, and we're going to have to push this off. Those are never great conversations or pleasant conversations. But when you start putting up those parameters, some people will be upset, but other people will really start to respect you. And one of the things I talk to my team about is you are the expert and the client is paying us good money because of your expertise. So if you're saying, well, I guess, or I wonder, there are times to say those kind of things, but they want to feel confident that they've chosen the right company. So sometimes you just have to say things based on your experience with, and my favorite phrase is, if this were my company, this is what I would do. And then it's up to them. It is their decision. But I'm going to say, if I were in your shoes, I would go with this tier website, or I would definitely do the SEO during the website build because it'll be more cost effective in the long run, whatever it may be.
Yeah, so good. So we met through our mutual friend, Paul Klein, who used to have a podcast called Pricing is Positioning. And I'm so glad.
And he was a great guest on my podcast too.
Yeah. So he was on the Agents of Change podcast and he came on my old podcast, Pep Talks for Side Hustlers. And he really broke my brain wide open when it came to thinking about the value of what I do, how to sell it, how to position it, how to talk to clients about it. I'm curious, what your early journey with pricing was and how it evolved over time in terms of when you were just you versus growing the agency. What's your pricing story?
So early on, I always was fascinated by psychology, and marketing is really just psychology put into the business world as far as I'm concerned. And pricing is it's really all about psychology. I mean, yes, there is you have to make more money than you spend part of it, but it really comes down to how you're positioning everything. And I remember from some of my early psychology college texts, the whole idea of anchoring and basically having a price. So when I first started, I had 3 price points for websites. It was and I'm embarrassed to even say these out loud now, but it was $500, $1,000, and $1,500. And I knew no one would ever spend $1,500 on a website, but I put that price in there because I just basically wanted to make the other prices feel more reasonable. And I think the third one was described as when you want to be the best in your industry, just to make it. And somebody's like, I want to be the best in my industry. I want that one. And suddenly I was completely scared because I'm like, oh my, now I actually have to deliver on this website that's going to be the best in his industry. So there was a lot of that. There was a lot of like, a lot of times I was embarrassed to ask for money. I was embarrassed to charge. There used to be before Constant Contact, we used an email service company. I think they were called Topic. I don't even remember. But it was like $30 a month. I'm like, I can't ask my clients to pay for that. So I'm going to put all of their stuff under my account. And that way they'll only have to pay. Terrible idea on about 100 different levels. Once I realized that all of them were basically locked into my account, they couldn't do what they want to do. I ultimately realized they just have to pay for what they're doing, and I will design, build, send out their newsletters, whatever services they want to pay for. That took a long time. And then probably the most important lesson that I learned, and I really didn't learn this until like the last 5 to 10 years, is that if you want to be successful, especially in this industry, you have to come up with recurrable revenue. You have to find something that you can basically get a check from your clients every single month for delivering something. And that makes all the difference, because for the first 15 years of my business, it was hustle, hustle, hustle. And the only reason we survived the recession and everything else is because I refused to give up. Like, I'm like, it would be too humiliating for me to fail and close this business. So I will do whatever it takes to stay in business in terms of hustle. And while it worked, it was exhausting and it wasn't super profitable. These days, almost everything we offer is more of a recurring revenue play rather than a project. We still do websites. Those do tend to be projects, although we do have one lower end website that you can pay for monthly that we've experimented with. But my favorite things are to sell things like Google ads, SEO, and social ads, because I know that we have to manage those ads every single month. I know what the business is coming in. I know how long the contracts are. I know the churn rate on these, and it lets me sleep at night. And sure, it doesn't get rid of all of your concerns. We raised our rate recently, and we found that the churn rate was higher than we expected. And so now I'm hustling a little bit to play catch up. But it's so smoothed out, that feast and famine that used to drive our business. And when I talk to other agencies and other web developers who don't have that in place, I hear that story all the time. It's like either they're so busy, they've got no time to sleep, or they're so dead they can't fall asleep because they're freaking out.
I so appreciate you sharing that story, because I think the early pricing struggles that you shared are ones that I hear all the time. We've all been there. And just to see where you've gone, it's like, there's hope for all of us yet, right? Like, we've all made those early mistakes, and it is a journey. Sometimes you learn them through pain, sometimes you learn them through education. And I can so relate to like just being unwilling to let something fail, for lack of a better word, but just being so passionate about the thing that you're doing that you're just willing to like hustle so hard to keep it successful. And I've been through those ups and downs in my journey with this business, and you learn so much from it. But you mentioned recurring revenue. We just hosted an entire online conference last week with 30 guest speakers, all talking about different ways to create recurring revenue in your design business, because I'm right there with you. It is so important. And pricing that profitably and sustainably in a way that like doesn't take over your life, and being able to serve multiple clients and structuring it that way, especially when you're building a team. I don't know. I'm curious to hear your experience, but when I added team members, I wasn't necessarily emotionally prepared for the level of commitment I felt to making sure that they were taken care of. Like, it caused me to hustle so much harder, and it actually had a negative impact for a little while on the business, that I was like too enrolled in this, what I felt like was like a lifetime commitment to them and their family. Tell me more about like your philosophy on hiring, and maybe what some of those early experiences were like for you. You have a big team now.
Well, I mean, I have 10 people, including myself. So I don't know if it's a big team.
That's 10 times more people than I have, or 5 times more people than I have.
I know very successful companies that are either solopreneurs or 2 people. And then I know companies that are successful or not successful that have over 100 people. So
sure.
Before AI, my goal was always to get to somewhere between 15 and 20 people. And the reason was because I wanted to be too deep in every position. So if somebody goes on vacation, there's somebody to fill in. If somebody leaves the company for whatever reason, there's somebody to fill in until we bring in the next person. Like, we have been hurt by being so thin in certain positions where somebody left and it's like all of a sudden I'm running Facebook ads and nobody wants me running their Facebook ads. I mean, could I do it? Yes. I mean, but I'm like moved to tears at the end of it because I hate it so much. I have people now who are amazing at it. So as far as like hiring people, that's a decision for most people, like when you just get so busy and you know there's more work coming. For me, I had a client at the time that started demanding more of my time. And they basically said, we love working with you, but we need to give you more work. And if you can't take on that work, we're going to have to go elsewhere. We really think you need to hire another person. And that was really kind of how I got started. And I made every possible bad decision when it came to hiring in the early days. I had no process or anything like that. I didn't know about a lot of these local organizations like the Small Business Development Centers or SCORE, or any of those organizations that are there to help small businesses grow. So I didn't know who to turn to. I lucked out with a couple of hires. I didn't luck out with other hires. Now we have a whole process but at the time, you don't have a standard operating procedure when you're just starting out. So for me, it was just temp workers at the time. They come in for a few hours a week or whatever. It was out of my apartment. That kind of got weird. It was actually having more regular people coming into my house that caused me to get an office. Because I'm like, it's weird that like if I go to the doctor, I have to basically close the office for the day so I can go to the doctor because I'm not leaving these people alone in my house. So that then caused me to go out and get and start to become a legitimate business at that point, which led to other both positive and negative things. But yeah, hiring people, feeling responsibility for them, not just financially for them and their families, because you might be providing health insurance like we do. We contribute to their health insurance and some other things, but it's also to their professional growth, where that wasn't a consideration when I first started hiring people. I'm like, I need you to build a website. Like, go build this website. Where now it's like, okay, what courses do we need to enroll you in? Like, what's the training process for getting you up to speed? How do we show you not just to build a website, but to build it the Flyte new media way and things like that? So the bigger you get or the longer you be in business, I think the more SOPs you create, the more rules you create, which are both good and bad. Because I definitely have seen companies that almost become calcified because they're so into their SOPs that it hinders them from growth. But there does come this point where you've got all these different personalities and you start to have to make up rules so everybody feels treated equally and equitably.
I think about having team members and just the contractors and employees that we have. And it is so rewarding though, on the other side of like the responsibility and the pressure that I felt before. And then I like figured out like, okay, that's not a healthy way to run, to run this business. It is so rewarding to like mentor someone and watch them grow and help them build their confidence in their career and all of those things. I think that's super rewarding and a really fun reason to add to your team and not just be a solopreneur if you have that drive to like mentor and lead and help develop other people.
And you may not feel like you have it right now. Like, that was definitely not one of the reasons why I did it initially. Yeah. I needed people in the office.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because I'm in my 50s now. I've been around the block a couple times, that now kind of what I enjoy the most in my business has evolved. And one of the things I enjoy the most is watching the people on my team grow in a manner of confidence, grow in their abilities, grow in the number of things that they can do, and take on additional responsibilities. And that is rewarding. It may be different for different people. That was not why I didn't get into web design to help other companies. Like, just selfishly, I like this. But now it's like, that's really what we do. We're like, our mission is to help these companies grow, to help the little guys win. And so I think you don't have to necessarily, if somebody's listening and they're like, oh, I don't feel that way, maybe there's something wrong with me, or that's not my path. All I can tell you is sometimes you don't realize all that you're capable of and all that's in you until you actually start doing it. And then you're like, oh, wow, I really enjoyed this aspect of business. I should do more of this. Or I'm going to give up some of these roles and responsibilities because I see that mentoring people or whatever it is much more rewarding to me. So I'm going to focus on that parts of my business. And that's the other nice thing about having other people on your team is you can really start to niche down into the things where you bring the most value. Like I said, I don't ever want to have to run anybody's Facebook ads again. But I love talking to people about their business. I love brainstorming on how we can drive more traffic to their website and convert that traffic. And I love just kind of talking to you right now about like what it's like to run a business. So very often I'll get on a call with a client and be like, look, owner to owner, I need to share something with you. And that is some of my favorite parts of the job. Designing websites, it's certainly not my skill set anymore. And also just not necessarily where I find my passion.
Yeah, same. I mean, I love what web design allows entrepreneurs to create in terms of like business and creativity and technology and blending that all together. But I have evolved beyond loving that. I think what I love the most about that I realize now is just like the problem solving aspect and the opportunity creation aspect, and just like, oh my gosh, we can build anything. Yeah, I love that the most, but
Right.
I don't have to use that outlet anymore. And I've definitely evolved beyond that, because you don't want me touching your website. I'll put
No.
a typo in a link, and that's just me.
Yeah. And I think it gives us the ability to create much greater works of art
Yeah.
and commerce
Yeah.
because you're not limited now by my design skills,
Yes.
my CSS skills, or even my marketing skills. And so you become if you want to. I mean, the bottom line is there is nothing wrong with being a one-person shop for the rest of your life, cranking out websites and making people happy, and you never want to have employees. There's nothing wrong with that as long as it's satisfying to you and you're paying your bills. But I have found over time that my interests and desires and passions have changed and evolved. And the nice thing about having the company is like, I used to be the project manager. I'm terrible at organization. I now have two great, one is elevated to director of ops now, but two amazing women on my team who are so much more organized than I am, and letting them basically run the projects and in one case, run the company while I'm out there being the quote unquote visionary or talking head or thought leader, whatever. We're all playing to our strengths. And through that, the company is able to accomplish so much more, and we're able to do so much more for our clients.
So part of your thought leadership has been the Agents of Change, the podcast, the conference. And we were chatting a little bit before this about the conference and kind of the future. But tell me about the start of Agents of Change and why you created that and where it's going.
Yeah. So Agents of Change I had two side hustles, not even hustles, two side projects for a while. One was called The Marketing Agents, and that was the podcast. And the other was the Agents of Change, which was an annual conference I put on. Basically, I had started with two friends when social media became a thing. We said, let's put on a little event here in town in Portland, Maine. And we named it Social Media FTW. And we put it on for 3 years, and it was a huge success, but the band broke up, no hard feelings. And I decided I still really like A, being in front of an audience, and B, putting on a party that happens to be in the shape of a business conference, marketing conference. So I rebooted. And at the time, I wanted to do more than just talk about social media, which was all anybody wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about search engine optimization. This is back in 2012. And which SEO was kind of like people had stopped talking about it. And I'm like, it's still how most of my clients are getting their business. And then mobile marketing was the other piece of this. And nobody was really talking about that. But I'm like, I see the percentages of people who are coming to websites on mobile devices. I think we need to be talking about it. So those were the original Agents of Change. And they were, because I'm a comic book nerd, they were literally, I had an artist friend of mine draw these three characters, search, social, and mobile, as kind of this like cross between like the X-Men and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but like for marketing. And so after about 100 episodes of The Marketing Agents, I realized it's the same thing. So I kind of just merged them in. I changed the name of the podcast, and everything fell into this Agents of Change. Agents of Change is about helping people become the best digital marketers they can become. And Flyte New Media is about, let us do this for you. So there's a lot of the Venn diagram, there's a lot of overlap here. And I discovered, although this wasn't the intent, that by putting on my own event, getting up there on stage, bringing in all these world-class speakers from across the US and really all across the globe to my little town of Portland, Maine, that we were suddenly being seen as much more of a choice when it came to web design or marketing. And very often people will tell me, I'll say, how'd you hear of us? And they're like, I've been going to the Agents of Change conference for years, and I'm finally ready for a website or SEO, what have you. So it did become a lead generation tool for us, which is great. but I wouldn't recommend it. Putting on events is a lot of work. Like only do it if you're really passionate about it would be the advice I have. And the podcast, I just love learning and I love having
Yeah.
conversations with people about things I'm passionate about, things they're passionate about. We're up to, I think I was just putting together the show notes for episode 577. So that's over 10 years of weekly podcasts that I've done. So it's something that is just part of what I do week in and week out. And what we were talking about before the show started is you were asking me about the conference this year. We just had our 10th annual one back in October. We're actually going to take a little hiatus. And the reason why we're taking this hiatus is because the conference is a lot of work. People's needs have changed. And for us internally, we decided that we needed to fully commit to integrating AI into our business. And so from my standpoint, when we looked at like all, I, always not exactly a mood board, but I got all my stuff that I want to accomplish in the following year in front of me. And I'm like, something's got to give. And the conference just felt like it needed a break. It needed a pause. Maybe it needs to be reinvented. Maybe it doesn't come back. I have no idea. But the focus needed to be on really figuring out how do we integrate AI into what we're offering clients in an ethical way and in a way that adds value. Like it's not just about like, oh, we can do more and faster. We can churn out a bunch of content because of AI. That's the least worst form of it. But how do you integrate it into everything that you're doing so you're creating a better output for yourself and for your clients? And we're literally right in the middle of that process today. And my goal is we'll have a pretty good handle on it, maybe by Q4 of this year.
When you shared that, I was like, I cannot wait to ask you about that because, at first, designers were like, I'm afraid. Copywriters were like, I'm afraid. Now they've embraced it as like, oh, now I have a collaborator. But there is still a lot of questions about ethical, just being original, all of those things. So when you say you want to make sure that you're doing it ethically, what does that mean to you?
So some of the things that we talk about internally is, first of all, keeping sensitive data private. And a lot of times when you're working with an AI tool like ChatGPT or Claude, you're uploading documents. And so the question is like, what's okay to upload and what's not okay to upload? Now, if you look at creating custom GPTs, and I don't get too nerdy right now, I don't know if that's what your audience wants, but there does become a checkbox that says it's automatically checked. And it says, we can use your data, uploaded data to train our models. And I immediately uncheck it. I'm hoping that they're actually honoring that, but I don't know. If I was uploading something like Google Analytic report or a P&L, I would anonymize the data first. I would get rid of all the client names. I might just put in a code that only I understand, run it like that. Because if you're uploading something, you don't know that it's not being used to train. And then what happens if somebody on the other side of the world says, I want to do competitive research on these 3 companies, and they list one of the companies. Well, all of a sudden they know their Google Analytics information that shouldn't be made public, or they know their bank statements that shouldn't be public. That's like one thing. We also have some conversations around the environmental impact, which I'm aware of, but it's not going to stop me right now. But I do have a couple people on my team who raise that because they're very concerned about that. So we're talking about how do we minimize it? My personal feeling is the big tech companies are going to figure that out, and every new technology is probably not environmentally sound because that's just not the way people invent things. They invent things and then they make them better. But that's another thing. Bias is another issue. Copyright is another issue. So we're having discussions internally, and then we share them with anybody who's listening with how do you do this when you know that AI can provide biased results or that it can provide hallucinations. So we're trying to figure out ethical ways that we feel are ethical. Like I would never just say to ChatGPT, write me an article on wood insulation and then hand it off to the client and charge them $1,000 for that. Like to me, it breaks 2 cardinal rules. One is there's no value. There's no $1,000 value to that product I just sold. But the other piece is I hate the amount of signal to noise on the internet, and AI is making it worse in an exponential way. So I'm not going to contribute to that. So I will use AI, and I've written about this. I'll use it for SEO research. I'll use it for giving me a framework. I'll do it for content gaps. Go research the top 20 results for this keyword, and then tell me what are things people are not talking about. I'll use it for brand all these things, but I'm going to write the content myself. And then when I'm done, I might run it through some other prompts and custom GPTs I've written to get a second opinion on that. And then I, as the expert, the human expert, then I'll decide if I want to make any changes based on what the AI is telling me. So in my mind, and it's going to vary for everybody, that is my ethical use of AI.
I think all of those things when I'm working on my own things and I'm like, what am I putting in here? This is my intellectual property. Like if I am using AI to help me think through what I want to write in a presentation or a solo podcast episode or whatever, or maybe I take a transcript of something that I've done and put it in and ask it to like remix it for me. Yes, I'm unchecking that box, but also I'm feeding you all of my IP that's not already out on the internet already to
Right.
help ask you to help me come up with things like if I'm asking it to help me do some internal things inside of our program. So I'm always kind of thinking about the weight of trusting that. I guess I would say the benefit is outweighing the risk to me right now. Like information is going to be freely available. The value in what we do is not necessarily, what I think about me as a teacher, someone who's a teacher and a mentor and a coach. The value isn't going to be in the strategy that I teach. It's in the support of you implementing the strategy because that information is freely available out there always now, especially with AI. And I'm constantly thinking about how can I use this to help me better help my students and not be so like, oh, I don't trust it. I don't want to put this in here for my own personal
Right.
use. Now, when I'm thinking about somebody else, I'd be way more cautious. But things are changing, whereas the information is not necessarily the thing of value anymore. It's how it's being interpreted or how you're being guided through it. And you can totally tell when it's just a bot and not not a human. So
Sometimes you can.
yeah,
Sometimes
sometimes
it's
you can.
pretty sophisticated. But yeah, and I think most everything that I know, I share online. So it's
Yeah.
probably already scraped everything
Yep,
I had to
exactly.
offer up until this point
Yeah.
in time. But find the ways that it makes sense for you. And for
Yeah.
some of your audience, it might be like, give me a mock up of a landing page as a starting point. So it might
Yep.
be about ideation. Or, if they're designers, give me a mock up for a day spa that the theme is turtles, and it'll give you some ideas to kind of get you going. But I would never take that image and sell it to a client. Like that's ridiculous, right? But I could see using it to spur other ideas.
Yeah.
Or you can create bots that would basically take a look at landing pages or work that you've already done and provide feedback. What's missing from this page? What would give a person a reason to hesitate, not move forward with us based on what this page is? So there are ways that you can kind of use it to get second opinions, and also some of the research tools, especially the deep research that some of these tools can do, usually at a premium price, but is incredibly helpful. And some of the research that you can do will take ChatGPT or Gemini 5 to 20 minutes that would take us 10 hours. And it at least gives you that initial starting point. I never trust it entirely. We talked about hallucinations, but there are definitely ways that you can automate some of your processes. And again, just get that second opinion on some of your work, especially if you're a solopreneur and you don't have somebody to talk to all the time. I mean, I remember that back in the day, and this was before there was so much connectivity online that you were kind of working in a silo. And so if you feel that way, sometimes having a tool like an LLM like Chat or Claude, that can be very helpful too, just to bounce ideas off people. Although I would definitely recommend that probably one of the best things that I ever did for my career was forming a networking group, a mastermind, where I could talk to other people about what they were going through and share ideas as well. So humans, yeah, at the end of the day, humans are better, but ChatGPT is cheaper. So there you go.
So good. I'm so curious to hear how this goes for you. And I'm sure all of our listeners are too, to hear more about your journey of integrating AI into your agency. So is that something that you'll be talking about on your podcast and on your channels?
Yeah, actually, that's really interesting. So I did just do a presentation on practical AI, which was literally a breakdown of 5 things that I'm using AI for. And I walk people through the process and include things like building a buyer persona, ensuring brand voice, doing deep research, a couple other things as well. That's a webinar that's now available for free on our website on demand at takeflyte.com. But also, I did end up converting that into a podcast episode that'll be airing in the next few weeks, depending on when this is. Might have already gone live, but that'll be going live on the Agents of Change podcast, I would say in early April 2025. And then I'm just going to keep on updating it because I do think that there's a benefit to sharing how we're using it and kind of showing people an ethical way to do it where you're not just generating more crap for the internet and really doing something that adds value to what you create as well as what your clients receive.
Amazing. Well, I'll definitely link all of that up in the show notes and share that podcast episode when it comes out, because I know all of our listeners will be really, really intrigued to hear from someone who's leading that charge. So I just have one more question to ask you before we wrap up. And it's one that I ask every guest that comes on the show. And that is, what's one belief about yourself that you had to change to get to where you are today?
I think basically, I don't know that I can put it into a pithy statement or anything like that, but I definitely had a lot of self-limiting beliefs when I got started. I was afraid of putting myself out there. I was afraid of, am I charging too much? I was just questioning everything I was doing. I didn't think I was smart enough or good enough. And basically, at some point, people were going to come along and steal all my business because I didn't know. And what I realized is you just got to put in the reps. Basically, you just got to get some real world experience. You've got to work with real clients. You have to do your best work. And after a while, people started coming to me thinking that I was some sort of expert. And I remember literally I had an employee go to some sort of like marketing breakfast, and they said I was sitting next to somebody. They didn't know who I was. And they turned to somebody else and they were discussing something. And then they finally said, "What would Rich Brooks do?" And I was like, I'm terrified that they would actually think that I know what I'm doing. But it does go to show you that a lot of this is just like getting that experience, and then you start to build confidence, and then you feel better about the advice that you're giving, and you realize that you're actually helping people. So that was a very long way, but it was like just kind of developing that self-confidence based on actual experience and competence. I tell my daughters this all the time. Competence leads to confidence. There are people who are confident who can't do anything. Ignore those people. But I think really like if you aren't feeling comfortable about being able to go out and tell people why they should do a website with you or why they should do marketing with you or why your ideas are better than the ones they have right now, when you start to show that you can do the job, then you'll feel that confidence where you can say, look, I know you've been doing it this way for so long, but I really think that if you shift your mindset here and if we build out this page and do this campaign, you're going to be much more successful and you're going to be a lot happier. And that's going to come from just putting in the work.
So good. Rich, thank you so much for being here. Can you share with everyone where they can go to connect with you and just get in your world and learn from you?
Sure, but absolutely. I think that we need to use ChatGPT to take the last 3 minutes of me babbling and turn it into one pithy statement, and we'll make that my quote for the day.
I'll do it.
Yeah. All right. So if you like learning about marketing and digital stuff, and you obviously like podcasts because you're listening, I would check out the Agents of Change podcast. Like I said, we're about 577 episodes in. I interview some amazing digital marketers on all aspects of helping people reach and engage their audience online. If you want to connect with me for anything, I am the Rich Brooks on just about every platform out there, although LinkedIn is my jam. I know that sounds so lame, but honestly, I really can't stand almost any other social platform at this point outside of Reddit. So find me, reach out to me, talk to me, and yeah, I'd love to have a conversation with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And no one will find me on social media either because I share the same sentiment as you. So,
Sounds good.
Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye. Hey, so before you go, quick question for you. Have you been listening to the podcast for a while and are curious if the Web Designer Academy is right for you? If that sounds like you, request an invitation to our next open house where you'll get to attend our next live strategy call and then take a tour of the program with me and get all of your questions answered. All you got to do to get your invitation is go to webdesigneracademy.com/open house. Fill out a quick form telling me more about your web design business and your goals. And if it looks like I can help, I'll send you a link to join us at our next open house. Zero pressure, zero commitment, just a chance for you to check it out and see if it's the right fit. To get the date and time of our next open house and request your invitation, just go to webdesigneracademy.com/open house. That's webdesigneracademy.com/open house.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.